You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy Podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jesper Schmidt.
Hello, I am Jesper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 65 of the AmWritingFantasy Podcast, and I think editing has sort of been a focus over the last few episodes with a small detour into map making last week, but
and how much to read while writing.
Yeah, but from next week onwards, we're going to move the topic away from editing. But today, though, we have one more episode for you which centers on a question often asked, and that is, how much should I edit while I write?
So it's still sort of a theme, because we've been talking about, how much to read while writing. So we're still on the writing part, but that's kind of what we're about, isn't it?
Yeah. I think so. It might be in the name of the podcast.
I think it might, but this will be a fun one. It'll be interesting to hear your take, and I put a lot of thought into this one, and it's making me question what I usually give as advice. So I'll just leave that there right now.
That can be good or bad. I'm not quite sure what to make of it.
It was some self-reflection time. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So how are things on your side of the ocean?
Well, it's been pretty quiet, to be honest. I was supposed to do some business travel last week, but that got canceled because of coronavirus concerns. And I was also supposed to go to Cairo in 3 weeks from now. That also got canceled because of coronavirus. So, I've just sort of been maintaining, business hours from home. And then early in the morning hours, I've been very focused on trying to get the plotting done for our next novel.
Oh, I'm so excited. I love where this plotting is going. So I can't wait till we get to write it.
Yeah, I'm only missing to plot out 3 more chapters, and then awesome. The plotting is almost done after that. So
fantastic.
It shouldn't be too long, I would say, but I cannot forget that we have like 3 courses to
finish building.
Publish this year's first.
Yeah. Website
so writing is long off.
Yeah, it might not happen quite as fast as we wanted to, but yeah, it's always when you're a writer, you're always waiting to get to the writing. But there's a lot of business side of being a writer that we've got to take care of too at the moment.
Yeah, especially with all the nonfiction like author stuff that we're doing here, so that takes up a lot of time, which is okay. That's fine. I like doing it as well. Yes. But I must admit, once you've sat down and you plotted the whole thing, it feels like I really would like to write it now, but it has to wait. It has to wait.
Yes, I felt that way when I read the outline to the first 3 chapters. Like, I want to. Okay, no, we're gotta put that back on. Don't touch. Bad.
Indeed. So, how about you then?
Well, I feel so successful because my little cabin room I've been building has walls and insulation, and it actually has doors and windows, and we're actually on the inside paneling, and then it's some built-in bookshelves, and eventually, as the weather warms up, finishing out the outside trim. So it's almost there. I have been good, and I've gone down to only a half day of building so that I can do, like the Writing Fantasy work we were just talking about. I'm so far behind, so I've got to catch up, but it's been good and it's exciting, and it is oddly warm in Vermont, which is troubling, but it is hard to ignore one of those days where you open up the door, the window, and it's above 20 Celsius in the high 60s Fahrenheit, and it feels warm. It feels the birds are singing, and you just want to go plant a garden, and you don't even need a coat. And it's just like, I'm just going to go sit outside for a few minutes. And yeah, So life's good. Been sitting outside a little bit with my dog next to the stream that's in front of the cabin thinking, this is pretty darn awesome.
I'm a bit envious. It was like a couple of hours ago. I was at soccer practice with my son, and it's not warm here. It's like what is it, like 8 degrees Celsius or something like that. So it's not warm at all. But that's okay. We're used to that here in Denmark. But it was more like it has not. It's been clouded all day long, and then like 5 minutes before we need to exit to go to the soccer field to go to soccer practice, it just starts pouring down. It was like, Jesus, right when we had to go out, it started. It was just like, oh my God.
That's
so
horrible.
Hearing about 20 degrees Celsius, warm, nice weather.
Sunny.
It's a bit, I can get a bit envious, to be honest.
I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, just to make me feel real bad, right?
I live vicariously with your kids. You can live vicariously nice weather through me.
All right, that's fair enough.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy Podcast.
So we have like a constant influx of writers joining the AmWritingFantasy Facebook group.
Yes, we do. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And I actually checked earlier today. We've had 6,200 posts and comments over the last 28 days. What do you think about that?
You're kidding.
Yeah, that's what it says in Facebook. Analytics.
Facebook's never wrong, of course.
Well, no.
But I like that stat. I'm going to say we go with it. That is absolutely astounding. I mean, I know it's like I go in there and it looks like, Luke or you has just let someone in and there's already like 3 people lined up. I'm like, oh my gosh, we can't keep up. This is amazing. It's wonderful. But it is such a fantastic group. Like I said, I don't even like Facebook, but I like Facebook just for the Writing Fantasy group. It's worth it.
Yeah, there's a lot of help and advice to get in the Facebook group for you, listener and fellow authors. We do our best to be quite strict so that we keep it clean for any like promotional stuff. And as soon as we see something, we delete it, and we do warn people, and we also kick some people out if they can't behave.
Happened. Yeah.
But what it means is that the Facebook group is a very helpful community of fellow fantasy authors. So I just picked out a few, like, so Faye, for example, asked what editing software people use and why. Mm-hmm. Mike wanted to know the titles of people's favorite fantasy books from the past. And Arthur asked for some writing advice with regards to the need of showing the reader the protagonist's family, or if he could leave that out. So I just picked a random few pieces there, but as you can hear, there is all kinds of questions in the group, and they all get answers. So if you have not joined yet, feel free to do so. Just search for AmWritingFantasy in the group section of Facebook, and we will let you in as soon as we see you.
As soon as we
the
get
list
to
of
it.
things to. Yeah, well, we usually try to approve people, every day, but it often happens that both myself and Autumn and Luke ends up letting people in on the same day in like 3 different portions.
Morning, noon, and night, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But that is quite the breadth of topics. That's what's so neat about it is, I mean, it literally, you go in there and it covers everything. So I kind of like that. I've seen life questions to editing to publishing to formatting to covers. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it is, to be honest. It's good. It's really good.
Yeah, it is. And I think we've had a little bump with people joining us on our Ultimate Fantasy Writers Starter Kit. And I think it's from the Women in Publishing Summit that I was just a part of. The number one watched session was actually the Writing Tips panel that I was a part of. So that was kind of really fun. I know.
Yeah, that's good.
Total success, and helping so many other authors. And through that, I linked people to the starter kit. So we just had a whole bunch of people join there. And one of them recently, Mary Van, she left a comment of a phenomenal amount of information. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise. I look forward to taking your course in the near future. So that's so nice of her to have stopped by and left a message. And yeah, I'll make sure I put a link in the show notes if anyone else is interested in joining us on the starter kit, which is our little free video course. So if you're looking for some ideas on how to start writing, so you can start writing strong and develop your ideas, how to avoid some of those novice pitfalls that can totally keep you from ever finishing your novel, and then pick up the top 10 tools to make sure you do succeed in writing, that'll be waiting for you in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's 3 videos that you're going to get there by signing up. So we're going to email you 3 different videos. I think they're spaced out a bit, if I remember correctly, or I missed
that way that way you don't feel like you have to watch it right now. You can, you got a couple days.
Yeah, so we will email you 1 video at a time once you sign up, and then you can watch it at your own time. So that's nice.
And on to today's topic.
Oh, so how much should I edit while I write? I mean, this is a bit of a tough one, to be honest. And, you already alluded to the fact that that you had to do some thinking when preparing here.
Yes, I did some major self-reflection, because my advice has always been, do not ever edit while you write. Just don't do it. Just write forward until you finish that first draft. And I've said that for, I don't know, I've been giving advice since 2012, so for almost 8 years, I guess now. And I realized that when it comes to living that advice, what I do is entirely different, but it's not editing full out, but there's definitely some editing while writing. And there's I have a couple of really good reasons of why I go back and edit. But what do you try to do?
Well, I also have to say, when preparing this, when I prepared this episode and thought about what my point of view was on this topic, I also came into the preparation of this podcast episode thinking that, well, I know exactly what I think about that. But then the more I sat and I sort of thought a bit about it, then I started doubting a bit, to be honest.
It's
about,
not that black and white.
No, exactly. Because, okay, but I think if we maybe it would be a good thing to just sort of, if I just list out here the sort of the 2 opposing viewpoints here. And now, in reality, I don't think it is this black and white at all. The more you think about it, it is not. But if we just for 1 second here look at it black and white, so you have 2 opposing viewpoints, right? So, so on one hand, we would find the writer who believes that it's best to write your first draft as fast as possible, not pausing to do any editing at all as you write. Ignore all misspelled words and all that. Just leave it and just write. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we would then find the author who believes it's better to take a bit more time with your first draft in, fixing any obvious errors, or even like if you come across any plot problems, then you can fix those as you go as well. And that's I guess that's the 2 opposing positions, but the more I think about it, there's not a right or wrong way of doing this, but I think that's what we're going to get into discussing here a bit, because this is something that is often debated. If you search on the internet and whatnot, there's a lot of viewpoints on this kind of stuff, and I think the only thing we can do here is we can sort of look at the topic and give you some things to think about, because I think this is something you have to decide for yourself, what works best for you. And what might work well for you is not necessarily what works for me. I mean, there is also those who are a bit like perfectionists, and you get too bogged down in editing when you're writing, and instead of finishing that draft, you just keep perfectioning things, and that's not good. But on the other hand, there's also those who, if you know that there's an error in the manuscript, it just drives you crazy not to fix
that's
it.
Me.
So that's also a problem, right?
That is a problem. It can become a total roadblock. But I think we should look at the pros and cons maybe of both approaches, and then sort of the hybrid, which is probably where I am, because I'm a hybrid pantser and plotter. So why wouldn't I be a hybrid editor while writing as well? I think I'm a hybrid in my life. I don't know what I'm a hybrid of, but I'm a hybrid.
I think sometimes you have like a spyware on my computer or something, because literally the next bullet on my list says pros and cons.
We are that in tune. It doesn't matter that there's the Atlantic between us. We just know what's going on.
That's so weird.
You're not used to this yet. It's been like 3 years.
I guess it can still surprise me. I mean, how can you pick exactly what my next bullet point says?
That is really pretty good. Oh, but yes. All right, so we're going to do pros and cons. What's the next bullet? Are we jumping ahead, or are we good for this now?
Yeah, let's just start with the pros and cons here, right. And then see a bit. I mean, it's not that I have a lot about pros and cons. I've kind of kept it a bit simple.
Okay.
But I think maybe to start out with, I could say like one of the pros of editing as you go is that your first draft is obviously more cleaner, and I would guess that it's probably also more cohesive once you're done than it would have been if you didn't edit anything.
Right. And for this one,
does that sound fair?
That sounds fair. And I was thinking, what really comes to mind to me when someone edits, especially extensively with every single, let's say chapter, that's just easier instead of scenes. I know a few authors who are very new and very inexperienced, and they actually either find a coach or a mentor or just good beta readers, and they're sending almost every chapter, and they're really going over it and really fine-tuning it and really working on character development and scenes. And to me, it seems amazingly time-consuming, but I also know that might be what some people really want and need, especially for like your first novel. You're really learning. So there's something to be said about making it work that way. If that's what works for you, and you find someone, especially someone to bounce it off of, you're not just running around in your own head, which is, I think we're going to get to in the cons. But in the pros, if you find that mentor or a coach, or whether you're paying for them or whether they're there just out of the kindness of their heart, they're passing it on to you, that's not a bad way to develop a story if you're getting that help from an outside source. I think that could be really a benefit.
No. Yeah, I mean, because there's something to be said as well about it. All of this also depends on where you are in your writing journey. Mm-hmm. I don't remember if I shared this story before on a past podcast episode, but when I started out writing first, I found a critique partner. It was, somebody who was experienced in writing himself. But I only found this one person, and I did that on purpose because I felt like when I was first starting out, I felt like if I'm going to start sending this stuff out to beta readers, and I'm going to get whatever, 20, 30, 40, however many beta readers I could find. But whatever, or let's just say 5 then. 5 beta readers maybe, right? And then I would get 5 different types of feedback. And I felt like when I was first starting out, I feel like I was so in such a vulnerable place where I would be very affected if I get 5 different types of feedback, because I was not experienced enough to actually say, okay, this is I ignore this stuff, this doesn't matter.
Right. This is opinion.
There's a good point important here. I'll take that point. That's good, and then delete those points. I was not in a place where I was able to do that. So instead, I just found, okay, I'm going to find one person that I trust, and then what I did was I actually sent him one chapter at a time. So I just wrote one chapter and sent it to him, and then I got feedback, and I rewrote it, and I sent it back to him again, and he came back, rewrote it again, and I think I did it a million times. I don't recall it, but I did it a lot of times, especially in the first 3 chapters. I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and every time he came back and said, well, this doesn't quite work, and do this and look at that, and then I rewrote it again and again and again until I think it took 3 months or something. But then at some point he said, okay, I think you're ready to start writing the first half of the book now.
Wow.
So. And then I started and I wrote half the book, and then I sent that to him, and he gave me some feedback. But at that point, then it was not a lot of rewriting there. And then all of this, by the way, I should say, all of this happened after I tried on my own first, and I had to ditch 50,000 words that I've written. I just ditched the whole thing. And then I thought, okay, this is not going to work. I need help. And that was when I found that guy. And then once I've written the first half of the book, I got a bit of feedback. and I edited a bit on that, and then I wrote the last half and sent that to him, and then I was probably sort of good to go after that. But it helped a lot. But that was a lot of editing as I went. But that's also because I think this topic does depend on where you are in your writing journey and how experienced you are. I don't think we can ignore that fact.
No, and I agree. I mean, I think I had my manuscript pretty much done, but I did join a writer's group, a writing class, and then a writer's group, a creative writing class. And we kept going even after the class ended, and we went chapter by chapter. Everyone actually, it was one of those rare groups where instead of getting like only 5 minutes, I think we went for 15 to 20. I mean, if you're a fast enough reader or had short enough chapters, you could finish an entire chapter, and we're all kind if we're like, oh, it's only one more page, keep going. And so that really helped give feedback, especially even just hearing it is such a difference when you're speaking and versus editing, reading it. So often you'd find your own edits there. So that helped me quite a lot with my first novel. And so I think that was really an invaluable experience. So I think I did have the first draft pretty much done at that point, but the course was designed that basically you wrote the next chapter for the next class, and then you went over it, and then you wrote the next chapter. And that's what a lot of the other students that we kept going after the writers group, with the writers group after the course ended. That's what we did. We all tried to make sure we had the next full chapter ready to go. And so that was the same thing. And that's another really great way of getting feedback. And if you do need that kick in the pants to keep writing, you had a deadline because you had to make sure you had something to read the next week.
Yeah, that's true. I've never had any experience with writer groups myself, but I have heard some horror stories about it, especially, that I've heard some people who get those kind of characters in the writing group that is really just there to critique other people's work to make themselves feel better,
Yeah. I've been in 2 different ones, and the one was so bad that it's actually what inspired me to create the course, The Ultimate Fantasy Writer's Guide, because it was so unhelpful that I got angry and started questioning everything and looked it all up and said, okay, this is really the way you're supposed to do it. And the other one was really helpful, and I missed them quite a lot, and it was a fantastic experience. So yeah, I'm on both sides of that horse.
Okay. But But I think all of that also touched upon one of the cons of editing as you go. And that is, of course, that it's going to take you longer to complete the first draft. That's just how it is.
It is. It'll take you longer, and I still worry that if you don't get that outside help, if you're just rambling around in your own head, is this right? Is this wrong? Is this right? And you find yourself, especially the biggest clue, if you find yourself changing something and then changing it back and then changing it, that's when you need help. You just got to stop. Just stop. Full out stop and look for help. If you find yourself doubting that you're a good enough writer, get out of your head. Get some help. Don't just keep circling your own wagons because you're just driving yourself crazy and it's not worth it. Trust me, it's not. Get help. But that is definitely a con while editing. If you're editing on your own while you're writing, you will just be circling your own little crazy thoughts and you'll not be writing anything productive. You'll just be driving yourself insane.
And if that is you, then you could go and check that starter kit that we have in the show notes. At least that'll get you started a bit and give you some inputs and feedback.
Yes, and come join us on Facebook. And
that too.
Yeah, you'll at least have someone else to be like, help! You're drowning. Raise your white flag and say you need help, and we'll be there.
Absolutely. But I think, this is slightly off topic, but it just popped up in my mind now that we were talking about it. But I do think it's worth pointing out as well that when you are on your first book and you need some help, if you're trying to join a writer's group or you're trying to find a critique partner or only one person like I did, it is your own responsibility to try to vet who you're listening to. Yes. Because it doesn't matter. And honestly, especially there in the beginning, I think most writers are quite insecure in the beginning, at least I know I was as well, in terms of, is my writing well enough? Is this good enough? Do anybody care about this stuff? Is it nonsense? All those kinds of questions. They haunt you, especially in the beginning. They do. If you get input from the wrong person, that completely derail everything you're doing. So do be quite careful about trying to understand who is this person who wants to give you input. So why I'm saying that is also because while the Am Writing Facebook fantasy group is great and you can join and you can ask your questions, just be careful if you're just starting out that you don't join the Facebook group and post a question and then you're going to get 15 different responses in the comment fields. So just be careful, might not be the type of help that you need when you're first starting out. So just think a bit about that.
Yes, and that's very true, because I have to say, if I wasn't stubborn, my I don't know what would have happened, because my first writing group was the bad experience. And I think, to me, it really came down, I remember someone ripping me apart for using an adverb. And then 5 minutes later, they were praising someone for using the exact freaking same word. And you can hear it in my voice. I can hear it still. I still get angry.
You're still upset about it.
I still get angry. But again, that is why I went home and I said, okay, they were not even the right genre. I started saying, what do I have to do to write fantasy? How do I do this correctly for what I want to write? Because it was a multi-genre writers group. And yeah, if I hadn't been who I am and just I got angry and I figured it out and I went and asked questions. But if I hadn't done that, if I had been a lot more sensitive and I'd been just hurt and confused and lost and overwhelmed, I don't know where I would have ended up. So yeah, be careful and be kind to yourself. And if someone's not being kind to you, kick them in the butt. But I mean that metaphorically, not physically.
Or not.
Or not. Okay. But yes, so definitely be kind and look for not only kind advice, but good advice. And someone who, if you have a question like, why do you say that? Why do you mean that? And they don't give you an answer, just blow them off. You deserve to have a reason that you're being told this. And that is very important.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move into a pro of editing only afterward.
All right. Well, afterwards, you got the book done. There you go. There's your pro. You actually have an entire manuscript.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and you'll be finished with that manuscript quicker, like we said before. So like it's the opposite of before, of course. But the con is then, of course, that it might be quite messy, and you might need some time to clean it all up. And so it's just like the opposite of the situation of before. So, and I know it's pretty frustrating, isn't it? Because you see, the more we go into this, the more clear it becomes that there is no clear answer.
There is no clear answer. Yeah. Because, I mean, if you have some really big plot holes and you need to go back and fill them, or what if, oh my God, you missed something huge and really the whole thing got off track and you have to delete some stuff because you didn't stop and really think about this while you're writing. And especially if you're a pantser, this could be a huge issue if you wait till the very end to finally start questioning, is everything correct and going all right? Yeah, sometimes waiting till the end isn't the best thing to do either, unless you have a good outline and you really know you hit all the right spots so you follow it. Yeah, then at least maybe you have a hope that the book is in good shape.
Yeah. But what about those people who are then writing their first novel, So we're just giving them pros and cons here, but we're not really giving any answers. But do we have any answers? What do you think? Do we have any answer about what would you recommend? You said in the beginning that you had a clear point of view at first, and now you're not so sure. So did you arrive at any conclusion at that?
I think for my advice for a first-time writer, if you've never tackled a novel before, would be to join either a writer's group, one that is preferably in your genre, or to join, find a coach, find a mentor, someone who can help you through, and maybe do it in chunks, maybe not every chapter, but give them, I love the 7 steps of story structure. Give them their whole intro, give them your whole inciting incident, give them some stuff, then they can help guide you. I think for me, I took, I have an English degree, but I went back and did 2 adult writing courses when I decided to take writing seriously. And that really, I think, helped lay some groundwork. Part of it because I got so angry that I went and found different advice. But the other one ended up being very helpful and a wonderful experience. So, even me with an English degree, I went back and took a few more courses to get myself back in the flow. So I think for your first novel, if you're going to be serious about publishing, you're going to need help. you're going to need either a course, you're going to need a mentor, a coach, someone to help guide you through that first book. It really helps. It'll build your confidence, and it'll definitely give you a better product. Now,
I think I can be behind that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Whoa, we're in agreement. Oh, that is so weird.
A surprise.
Yeah. But now, as how many books? 16, 17 I've got done. Now I do tend to edit at least a little bit as I write, but it's not like grammatical. I don't worry about punctuation, but there are times the book doesn't feel like it's flowing. It feels like I've hit a wall, basically a writer's block. And again, I'm a hybrid pantser plotter. I have an outline. I know where the story's going, but there's some looseness in each chapter. And often when I hit that, it's because I hit a plot hole. And there's just something in my mind that's saying, hey, you missed something. And I've got to change perspective. I've got to think about it a little bit, do some brainstorming. And usually I figure it out, and then it goes boom, and I'm writing really fast again. So I do go back, and there have been times when I'm like, holy crap, I missed that, and I've got to go back and add a chapter, and I keep telling myself I can do it later, I know what's going to happen, and it's no, I got to go fix it now, I got to go fix that character, I got to go throw in sometimes foreshadowing go put that back in there now, just so I don't forget, just so I can get it out of my mind and on the paper. So nowadays I do sometimes edit while I'm going, because if it's a big element, if it's a plot element, if it's a character issue, I need to fix it before I go forward. Otherwise, I can't go forward as well as I'd like to.
No, that's fair enough. I think that there's, these different tiers in it, right? So you just explained, if you're only first starting out, and I agree with what you said there. And then, of course, there is the stuff about when you have written a lot of books, like you. And then there's I think there's also a point for those people who just written like 2 or 3 novels or something, because I think at that point, it is good to just keep in mind to get into the habit of finishing things, because you need that habit going forward, that once you start something, you also finish it. It's not like, the first novel might take you quite a long time. I mean, for some people, it takes years.
Absolutely.
And you might be working with this critique partner or whatever you do, or you take a writing course or something, but it'll take a while because you need to redo a lot of things many times to find the right stride there. But once you do, and let's say you get into book 3 and you get into book 2 or 3, I should say, then you probably have a lot better grasp about how do I construct the story and how do I make the story work. And there, I think it becomes important that you get out of the habit you had with the first book, where it took you forever because you kept redoing and re-questioning and updating, or whatever you want to call editing. And then start learning yourself that, okay, it's okay if I need to fix some of the plot holes here and there, I guess, but I also need to get to the finish line, and it cannot take me forever with book 2 and book 3. And it's because if you want, I mean, if you're just writing for fun, that's fine. But if you want to earn money from it, you also have to put out some products. You can't spend 3 years writing every novel.
No, I think your readers, especially in today's day and age where they're, I remember when I first started out, 1 book a year was okay, but there's a lot of readers looking for more than that now. And yeah, you can't take, if you can get it one done in 6 months, it's much better than waiting 2 years.
Yeah. And I struggled a lot with this because when I got into book 2 and book 3, I had a lot of problems not editing as I went.
Wow.
I often found myself editing something like, well, not like structural or plot edits, because I outline in quite detail, as you know, Autumn. You see the details I do for our first book here, and it's very detailed. It's like almost once I'm done with the outline, you can just fill in the blanks, and then you have a novel almost.
I definitely, it's impressive. Except I know what's going to happen, and it's very exciting. But yeah, it's not much more to get that actually done as a book.
Yeah, you just need to describe the scenery and a bit, not even emotions, because all the emotions is usually in the outline as well. So yeah, I know I'm an outlier on this stuff as well, I know. So I'm not trying to advocate to the listener that you should outline in this level of detail. But why I'm saying it is just because once I have my outline, and if you have a less detailed outline, that's perfectly fine as well. But what I'm just saying is that I don't have any plot holes because I outline. And if you do the outline correctly, you shouldn't have any really glaring plot holes either. So what I was more referring to was that when I was on my book 2 and 3, I was just doing a lot of the copy editing stuff. I spent too much time making the sentences sound just a little bit better, or just correcting this and that, even typos sometimes and stuff like that. It was just like it annoyed me a lot that I spent so much time on it. Because I wanted everything to go quicker, but at the same time, I felt like I just can't scroll past this stuff because it sucks. I need to correct it. So I kept correcting it, but it wasn't until I got into dictation that problem was fixed. Because as soon as I started dictating, nowadays I just dictate a chapter, transcribe it into the computer, and then I do a quick search and replace for all the fantasy words. We talked about how I use dictation back in episode 59. So go back and listen to that one if you're curious. Yeah. But I just do that very quick search and replace of the fantasy words. And then I just move on to dictate the next chapter. So because I'm not typing the words on the screen and I see the errors there on the screen while I write, I'm able to ignore the fact that these kind of, it's just sentences as I speak when it comes out. So it needs to very much tidying up in the editing, but it doesn't bother me when I can't see it as I type it. So yeah, dictation just fixed that entire problem for me.
That's really good. That is an interesting one that we didn't come up with when we were talking about dictation, because we weren't thinking about editing at the time. But that does make a lot of sense. And that's why I was actually having problems with dictation, is because I couldn't get what you have having a Mac. I couldn't get the Dragon software to then upload it and all those other fancy things, so that I was seeing, as I'm doing something else, I was seeing what I was saying, and it was horrifying because it wasn't as smart and as well adapted to my speech pattern and punctuation and everything else. So for me, it was like, I just need to, you need to not see what it's doing, because if you do, you want to go fix it. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to type, because I at least can put in the period where I want the period, and it doesn't think I said period, and it's just horrible. So but it is true. I mean, I think that is definitely one of the types of editing you shouldn't do until you're done. And even then, I mean, always do your content edit before you start even getting into the grammatical and the better language and all those other things. There's lots of other edits that happen before you get to worrying about if that comma's in the right place. So those are the ones you have to be able to let go.
Unless you plot in much as detail as I do, then there's nothing called a content edit.
Yeah, your content edit is actually before you write the blog.
It's in the plot, yeah.
It's in the plot. We've been content editing before we even get to writing, so it's kind of a reverse way of doing it.
Yeah, I guess you could say it, but it sort of just depends on in which phase you invest the time, right? Because you can rush through a first draft and get it done really quickly, and then spend 2 months content editing and fixing and going back and forth and fixing chapter 10. Oh, wait, then chapter 7 is incorrect and I need to update that. Or you can, like me, I take not full time, of course, but it probably takes me like a month to plot a novel. I think I spent like a month on this book one,
I think
I'm not incorrect.
I think that's about right. And of course, you've been waiting for me a couple times to come back and read through and make some changes. So it slows you down a little bit, but not much. You usually give me a pretty tight deadline. So we kept it moving pretty good.
You make me sound horrible.
It's not. It's been very exciting. So it's been fun, but definitely a different way of doing it. And I have to admit, there's times with the story I'm working on right now that there's like, I should probably have done a little bit more plotting. I love knowing what happens next. So that's kind of exciting, but I have not gone off my hybrid ways too deeply yet.
No, but it is, as we just said, right? It depends on where you invest your time, and that's basically up to you. And that's why you need to find your own way through this. But one thing I did find that was quite interesting when I was preparing for today's episode, I found some psychologists who were talking about multitasking.
Oh.
So, because basically, when we're talking about editing while you're writing, it is two different parts of the brain you're using, because one part is for creation, you're being the creative writer, and the other thing is about editing, where basically you're being critical. So you're applying your analytic mindset and being critical about what's written.
Okay.
And when you're switching back and forth like that, then you're basically multitasking.
Okay.
And these psychologists were saying that true multitasking is in fact impossible. So the best thing you can do as a human being is that you are able to be as good at switching back and forth between the tasks as quickly as possible. That's what you could sort of be good at that.
Okay.
Which I guess that's when, I mean, all of this might be semantics, but I think that's basically what people mean when they're saying multitasking. But what the psychologist said, and this is then the point of all this rambling here, what they said was that when you're multitasking, you're not being effective. So you're basically slower at what you're doing than if you were just focusing on one thing. So again, I'm not saying one thing is better than the other, but I do think it's valuable to just think a bit about the fact that the more you edit it while you go, the less effective you are with your time.
Okay. That makes sense. And I mean, I know at my height, I was writing a book while editing another book. And you're right. Then, hey, I'm insane. I highly admit that. But it worked really well because of I think I would edit usually first, because sitting down and getting into my writing routine, I was kind of in an analytical, I was coming off of work, which I have a very scientific job at the time. So I'd have that kind of mindset. And you do that for half an hour, and then I would kind of get into the creative, you start getting excited about words and language and where the story is going. And the next thing, then I'd write for an hour. And again, they were separate, and it was kind of gearing one up for the other. If my brain was awake enough to be analytical, it was good at editing. If I was, in more creative mindset, you got to have the juices flowing. You got to have that drive and inspiration. And if it wasn't there, you had to try to manufacture it basically. But they are definitely two different types of mindsets. And I would know they didn't mesh. You had to do one, then the other. Not you couldn't do both at the same time.
No, and I mean, it's not about editing as you're writing, but in general, at least I also feel like there's a limit to how much creative stuff I can do in a day. And I have to start out doing the creative stuff early in the day, because late in the day, my mind is just I can force myself to do creative work, but it's not as good as when I'm more awake, for a lack of better word, in the morning. In the morning, I'm good at the creative stuff. But I can only do a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Then I'm sort of out of my creative juices, and then I need to default to some marketing or publishing work that I can more do without thinking much about it. I mean, I've been doing that kind of, the business stuff I've been doing for so many years that I can do that kind of thing without having to spend too much energy on it. So I can do that if I'm tired. But creative stuff like plotting, for example, that's also why it takes a month, because if I could plot 8 hours a day, that would be a different matter. But even if I had the time to do that 8 hours a day, which I don't, but if I had, then I don't think I would be able to, because I would run out of steam.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And I mean, I took a leadership course, and we plotted our, not just energy level, but what we were good at doing during the course of a day. And creative in the morning and analytical in the afternoon is actually a very typical type of situation. So that makes sense.
Yeah, indeed. So I guess all we can say is here that we shared some inputs and things to think about, and you need to make up your own mind.
Yeah, and I think, though, there's some pretty good take-home advice that if you're a new writer, probably try to find some outside help and maybe get some editing, go by chapters or chunks of your book and get feedback. But once you get past book 2 or 3, try to just get it done without worrying about editing. Get yourself used to finishing a novel. Finish that first trilogy. That's a good thing. That should be your goal. And once you get beyond that, you might start, making sure you get the plotting right. You might go back and edit a little bit as you go, because, well, that's just, you'll finish. You just know you have to get it right, and it'll be a little bit better when you get to the end. that's my take-home message.
All right, so next Monday I have one of, well, if not the biggest name in the indie author community on for an interview, because I'm going to talk to Joanna Penn next week.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the AmWritingFantasy Podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jesper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the AmWritingFantasy Podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.